Hello and welcome to PBandJ, Episode 1. Michael will share his insights as a recruiter, tips for job applications, misconceptions about his role, who it might be suited for, and how much it pays. So sit back and enjoy. Today, we have Michael, our HR professional, as a guest, and let him tell you more about what he does.
Yeah, so as Jasper said, my name is Michael, and I'm in HR, mainly focuses on talent acquisition, which pretty much looks at the talent that we're getting into the organization and how we best keep them and integrate them into the business.
Cool. So is that the official name, talent acquisition?
Yeah, so kind of work in talent acquisition coordination and yeah.
So what, if you would put it into layman's term to someone who's never heard the job talent acquisition coordinator, how would you describe your job?
It's very much when you think of yourself going out for applying for a new job, it kind of goes from the end of you actually seeing that advertisement up on Seek or wherever you're looking at whatever job board, all the way to your interviews, coordinating that flow, making sure that you're the right fit for the organization, but also how we integrate yourself into the business and actually train you up and get that, that onboarding process as well and make sure that you stay in the business, hopefully for a long time. So it's very much that HR people manager side of things. So very much deals with people.
Cool. So you actually have quite a unique experience. So basically, whenever people see those jobs, you're the person from the company that's screening through and getting to pick who gets to interview and who doesn't. Is that right?
Yeah, so it depends. So sometimes the managers normally will look at those people that they want to interview and then I just pretty much liaise with the people. So sometimes I'll do the screening of people's CVs. So, sometimes it's hard to pick where it's always like a nitpicking process between some people and it can be tedious, but it's a good time.
Well, since we're on that note, what advice would you give people when applying for jobs as someone who sifts through all these applications? What do you look out for? What are the red flags?
When you apply for a job, always, always, always read the job description. There is, I think we all get caught in a trap that sometimes, I think even myself as a job seeker, when I was finishing uni or still in uni, you'd apply for jobs and you're like, I think I could do this, but I don't meet this one criteria. But sometimes it's always just that one thing that talent acquisition people will go through and they'll be like, you're just wasting my time. And then they'll see your name. But very important to read the job description. Always tailor your cover letter to the job because there's times when someone sends, and always double check your resume and your cover letter because people will send you job applications with the wrong job title, which they've probably applied for 1,000 other jobs with the same title. I think always double check that, make sure you tailor that and read the job description is always a good advice for anyone who's applying for a job.
So aside from tailoring the wrong name altogether, which I'm pretty sure I've done that before, what other giveaway signs are there that people haven't actually adjusted their application accordingly?
Sometimes it's very much with the job criteria because I think when you look in your CV and I guess the tasks that you put in with what jobs you've done previously in the past, try to tailor it to show your strengths for what you can bring into this new role. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. So, but then would they see, because, everyone can say, they have so many different strengths. So how would they pick which strength is better to give an example of? Is it through that description, that job ad?
Through the job description, and just always check what they want as essential or desirable. I always think that's very important for when you're applying for any job. And then, it's always just back up what you're saying and make sure you can show evidence of how you've done that. And if either it's a good cover letter that you write or included in your CV, because people pretty much just sift through for keywords sometimes. And in my previous role where I did recruitment, it was very much automated. The computer pretty much spits out the people who have certain criteria for you. And then that's who you actually look through. So
okay, so there's actually this role of technology that actually helps screen. How does that actually work for you?
Yeah, and I think that's where the future in terms of talent acquisition is actually going. A lot of companies are trying to implement a lot of artificial intelligence to help them actually cut down on human costs of actually sifting through the resume. So at the moment, a lot of artificial intelligence is picking up most of those keywords that I'm talking about. So if it talks about, I don't know, a certain program that you must have used, instead of saying have skills in Excel, instead of saying I have Microsoft Office experience, make sure you put in that keyword Excel because it will go in and sift and be like, you meet 5 of these words in your CV or your resume.
Yeah.
This is a person that you should be looking at. And sometimes it orders them in that order. So
Oh, wow. That's
yeah.
cool. Thanks. You actually read my mind. That was going to be the next thing I was going to ask, but we'll get to that a little bit later in terms of where the industry you reckon is heading.
Yeah.
But in terms of AI, the current industry right now, so you would definitely advise people to include those keywords, even though it may seem a bit redundant, right? Or assumed.
Yeah, definitely. I think you never assume anything.
Yeah.
That's the biggest question, because you think the person who's reading your CV doesn't know you.
Yep.
The first thing that they're getting is your CV. So there's some things that, I mean, should be assumed. For example, if you've, I don't know, done an engineering degree, I should assume that you've done engineering, and there's some things in there, but you'd never assume.
Okay, awesome. So it's good to hear, like, on the other side of the curtain, I think I've definitely been in a place where when I was looking for casual work, even, I've applied for over 50 jobs, and you was just wondering, where am I only hearing back from a few? I was really fortunate. I ended up working quite a few casual jobs in my time in uni, but it's really good to hear that, the steps involved and the essential criteria that we really need to meet in order to get that interview process, instead of just end up being disappointed or not hearing back.
Yeah, and that was a me thing, I think, too. When I was at uni, I think the same thing when you're like, I could do this job. I don't have to read this. Like, just get me that interview. And I always was a person who was like, if I can get my foot in the interview, surely then I can sell myself. But I think it's also about selling yourself at the previous step before the actual interview process. You don't want to just get something because it's there as well. So
yeah, no, it's good, because like, if you don't even get an interview, well, that's it. You don't get a choice. You don't get a chance.
Yeah.
So you might as well maximize your chance while you can, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Alrighty, that's cool. In terms of like the selection criteria itself, I've heard people say that, even if you don't meet all the essential criteria, still apply anyway. What's your take on that?
There's moments, I think, depending on the job, I think sometimes it's essential criteria and there's stuff that's desirable. I think with a lot of desirable criteria, there's sometimes, I have worked for clients one time, like previously in my previous role, who would have unicorn list of essential criteria that they're looking for. That person doesn't exist. Then there's those moments where you're like, if you actually know industry and you're actually on top of the market and you know that, hey, I've done this for this many years, I've done like work experience internships or whatever in a certain industry, and I know no one who has all these things that they're looking at in this criteria, like these are things that you either learn, I think then those moments I think apply. But sometimes you do get essential criteria and desirable criteria. If you don't meet all the desirable, that's just them saying, this is what my unicorn would look like. But if you can do this, you could probably do that as well. So, yeah, but I think there's some jobs that you can apply for when you just meet some essential criteria. But
okay, so generally speaking, hit all the essential criteria as a minimum.
As a minimum, and then it's kind of like get that many points for your A, and then if you want the A++, like, that's the extra. That's the extra work. Yeah.
But at the same time, make sure you're being honest, because like you can spot a unicorn when it when
you can spot a unicorn, and I think that's when, like, sometimes I've seen some people write in their CVs and talk about something that they say they can do, and then you go into interview and you describe me this process, and someone in my team did this, and
okay. Oh, that's
then
good
it's
to know.
Then it's awkward for both of you, because now you're like, okay, you're a nice person, but you lied.
So
So what else are you gonna lie about?
Exactly. Okay, so it really, like, interviews, is it like, it's kind of a bit like dating, right? Where it's kind of like, you not only are you looking for what they can bring, but you're trying to figure out like who they are as a person.
Yeah.
So like whether they align with the company values, whether they have the integrity to work, and whether you can really trust them to fit in with the team, right?
Yeah, it was very much so. When I did my previous role last year, a lot of the times I did interviews, I'd do like 20 interviews, 25 interviews a month.
Wow.
So it's pretty much like speed dating. Like, you have half an hour to kind of talk through these criteria. Not really, like, find out a little bit more about yourself and like your culture fit in the organization, but also I think also see how interested you are in the role, and actually see if you'll last a long time, because some people are just there for the money, and what motivates the people.
And that's in the company's best interest, because the more that they turn over staff, the more it's going to cost them. So what you're really looking for is candidates that are going to stay there for the long term.
Definitely.
Cool. So there you go. Thanks. You've already given us so much, nuggets of wisdom as to how to even land a job. But I think let's go back to what you actually do. So what type of What type of company do you work for? What type of stuff are you looking for, like currently?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm looking after I'm in the health industry at the
Cool,
moment,
cool.
so very much looking at health staff, so looking for physios, nurses, ranges sometimes to like therapy assistants, care workers. It's a huge field. It's very varied to what I look for on a daily basis, but
Okay, so what would they like? What would you say is a typical day? Or do you have a typical day?
not really, because at the moment I'm working on a project, so it varies because I'm implementing this project, but also trying to make sure that we're still keeping their processes in place. So trying to make sure that we go from an old system to a new system. But a typical day for me will look like going into the office, seeing I guess what we have on the menu,
Yep.
and then not googling, yeah, looking at what I need to do in terms of if there's any roles or like vacancies that need to be filled at the moment.
Yep.
Kind of map out where we're at, what the process is going to be like, just making sure that we're trying to get them in a timely manner and arrange interviews. It's very varied. There's no typical day.
There's no typical day. All right, fair enough. And would you say like your projects are also very non-typical without getting into the details?
Yeah, very non-typical. It's very much always trying to figure out how to integrate stuff into the business, but it will always vary on a weekly basis. One week we'll be talking about this part of like the recruitment process, and then one day we'll be like onboarding, how are we doing this, and actually just trying to figure out how to create a steady flow throughout that process for candidates as well, because we try to make sure it's easy for candidates, but also easy for the people in the HR side of things.
So there you go, listeners. HR people actually do try to make it easier for you.
They do.
Yeah. They don't always just try to make you fill 10-page selection criteria to never call you back.
I feel you when you're like, I'm writing this 10-page selection criteria or something like that, and they're not even going to read it. I mean, they're trying to make sure that it's easy, but I know sometimes it's
hard. You guys are just trying to make sure you get the best people for the job, essentially. Here.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, thanks for that. So let's talking about your role again, like talking about your type of job. Who would you say it's for? Like if I was a high school student or someone that was looking into a new industry, who would you recommend it to, and who would you not recommend it to?
I think if you're a person that typically enjoys change I guess in school, if you typically enjoy change and you don't mind your day-to-day changing, because sometimes you do have roles where you can go in and can be a bit mundane. If you actually like the variety of, I don't know what I'm going to do today.
Okay.
This could be definitely a job for you in terms of the talent acquisition side, HR, because you always get problems. Someone has something that they want to bring up as well, or like you always have those queries that come through. So it's always kind of on that level of, if you're a people person, but people person doesn't also mean, I guess, some people think, I'm a people person, I'm nice to people. Because, I think HR and talent acquisition for me, what that has brought in, sometimes you have to be mean. Sometimes you have to call people after,
talk right here, guys.
like after they've done, say 3 interviews and they've done all these things, just to tell them like, I'm sorry, we've chosen someone else, or you're not suitable because this has come back or like we've done a reference check, but we can't really say that. You know what I mean? There's things that I think I went into it in the mindset being like, I'm a people person.
Yeah.
It'll be so good. And then after like, a couple of beating downs of like, I actually have to deliver bad news to some people because it's their livelihoods. And I think it's, if you're a people person and you actually can relate to people and actually meet people where they're at and be like, look, I'm sorry, you probably don't have the job, but it's not the end of the world. You're a great kind of boost them back up to give them that inspiration and hope as well, because there's some bad HR people who kind of just like, you don't have the job, goodbye.
Right.
And there's a moment for that. But I think, so if you're a people person, you like a different day-to-day change, you don't mind a bit of admin in your life as well. But I think most important if you're open to change, because it definitely changes on a day-to-day basis. I think doesn't matter what industry you walk into, I think you can do the same job in a different industry, which I think you can move from, say I did manufacturing in my previous role, like recruited solely for those kind of engineers and logistics, and now to like the healthcare sense, it's kind of, it's different and you always learn. So just be open to learning, and actually you learn a lot from people that you actually interview as well. So be open-minded, be able to learn, and actually don't be too hard on yourself. So if you're that kind of person, this might be the job for you.
Cool. It sounds like it's like a really fluid, you're definitely working from different industries, like completely from hiring engineers to now hiring healthcare workers, like very different personalities typically as well, and very different expertise. So going on that, what other misconceptions do you think people will have where they're just like, as you said, oh, I love people, therefore HR. What else is there that, well, yes, you love people, but not necessarily. Like, are there any other misconceptions that people might have when entering HR thinking that, oh, this is a job for me?
Yeah, no, I think that's the you like people making hate, like, I think, yeah, people saying that they like people or they're a people person, yeah, because there's those hard decisions you have to make. Even minusing the recruitment part, there's a part when people are actually employed in the job, people come to you with, say, complaints about their bosses and like, or complaints have been raised against people. So it's how do you mitigate that, and actually that people management and actually conflict management side of things that people actually don't see. Because if you think HR, it's a broad, like our team is pretty massive at the place I'm working at. And yeah, so I think that's one thing. There's the people management side of things. So making sure you actually have good conflict management resolution stuff. There's just making sure that people are safe. So safety, that pops into the HR side of things, because I think it's important that sometimes you think people at work, they can do their own thing, but safety is a big part of it as well, because that's someone coming into your workplace.
Yeah.
Hopefully they have family that are hopefully relying that they can get home safe. So
Yes.
yeah, that's another I think those kind of people management, like it's an end-to-end process of like actually managing people and their whole like work process and things from there. Getting to know as well how to pay people correctly as well. That's another thing that...
Okay, so that's a part of your job as well.
That is also part of my
Wow.
job. There's
Yeah, it's like you're wearing like different hats all the time.
It is. It's a different hat. There's moments where you have to actually dive in and learn, I guess, what is like fair, common, like actually what agreements you have on for like work people, like the kind of levels that you pay people at based on their experience, actually making sure that you're paying them equal. Because at the end of the day as well, lawsuits do happen to the businesses. and you
don't want to be part of the reason.
You don't want to be part of the reason.
Yeah,
so I think it's always just making that's another misconception, is people are just like, yeah, we get the person, we know what we want to pay them, but it's actually a big learning curve, learning that there's all these rates that you have to know. And from someone who didn't study HR and actually had to pick up a whole bunch of stuff on the spot for myself, it was a big learning curve. Like, oh, wow, we actually have to pay people correctly, and not correctly, not in that I was going to pay people illegally.
Yes.
But it's like you actually have to figure out like everyone is on a different thing, and pay is actually something that's a huge part as well of people accepting jobs. And
okay, well, to me, as someone who has no experience in this at all, it sounds like it's a lot. How it sounds like you need to know everything. How do you have a team that helps divide up the work, or how do you learn all this? Because it sounds like you really need to have so many different hats on at the same time.
You just have to know how to research and Google. I think that's anything. Well, not just Google, but I think you have to just know how to find things. I think in any job that you take on, a lot of times, like when we're at uni, we think, oh, we're going to finish this and like, we'll know where to find all the answers. But even some of my doctor friends, and they're like, oh yeah, I just got a WebMD and type in the symptoms. It's kind of like that. So if I am, when I'm working and I'm like, oh, like I have a pay query, I need to make sure I know I have a couple files of like a whole big agreement or whatever. And you've got summary sheets as well. So it's always just knowing where to find the right information when it's needed. So it's very much uses those research skills that you have to kind of always know where to find things.
So like, yeah, that's cool. So you have to make sure, if you're someone who wants to go into HR, you have to make sure you like people, you can think a bit more holistically. It's not just about, as a recruiter, it's not just talent acquisition coordinator. It's not just about getting them in the door, but it's making sure that when they get in the door, they stay for a long time, that they're safe, that you're paying them correctly. And, it's impossible to learn all these things. You're bound to need to find out more information. And part of that process would just be thinking on your feet, knowing where to find that information, whether it be Google or
Google or some systems, asking someone on the team. There's a whole lot of people, especially I think whenever you start out a new job, always ask. The question I think I always like to ask is not a question of who do you have to support you, but always making sure that there's someone that you can always bounce off ideas with, and not just go in there thinking, I don't know, what do you call those things? I know everything.
I see.
But I think going in there and actually being like, if there's someone you can learn tips and tricks of the trade as well. So either if it's you're replacing someone, making sure either there's a good handover period or like where you can actually ask questions, or there's someone else on the team who's staying if you're just doing a sole role yourself, because I know some people are like the only talent acquisition, recruitment, HR person in their businesses. And just knowing that there's someone else, maybe it's someone in payroll, which is a whole other ball game.
A whole other ball game. So you can be in HR and specialize in payroll, or specialize.
Yeah, there's whole teams that specialize in. I don't think I could ever do it. I feel like it's a special. If people don't get paid, it's you.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely.
It's a lot of pressure on your shoulders then.
It's a lot of payroll. Is a lot of pressure on people's shoulders, because if people don't get paid, you're the first people that they hit up. I mean, most people always come to HR because talent, because they're like, you hired us, why are we not getting paid?
Yeah.
And we're like, this is not the right number. Divert.
Handball away.
100%.
Cool. So going on that note, saying like, who this would fit for, then what do you think is the difference between someone who's good at the job and someone who may not be as good at the job?
Oh, someone who may not be as good at the job. Oh, that's a really hard question, because I think if you think of people who are not good at the job, I feel a lot of goodness and badness. I think anyone can be good at the job.
Yep.
I think for me, in terms of if you're probably not motivated to go to work, that probably might not, or you don't have the right motivations to actually work and actually better yourself to actually learn, that might not be a good place for you. Or maybe if you're just a bit slow paced and you actually like chill days and you want consistency, that might not be, because it's very much, it always changes. So you probably want, if you're slower, but slow people, I'm slow sometimes. I like to slow pace sometimes. But if you're genuinely a slower person and like kind of similar things, lack a bit of organization sometimes as well, that could probably mean it's a harder job for you to do.
Yeah.
But I've also met some people who just know how to slog it out and actually put in more hours. But I feel if you're, like I said, if you're a good fit in terms of you're actually motivated and actually you're able to do a heaps of stuff. And sometimes I finish work probably 2 hours before I need to actually finish, because you're quicker at things, and then you leave room for I don't know, Netflix, getting more coffee.
Netflix at work, dream.
And there's some people who are just a bit slower, that actually it takes them the full day to actually do their tasks and stuff. And I think you can actually do it even if you're not great at it. But I think you'd have to look at your motivations, because I think once you actually get the groove of things, you actually can be quicker at doing stuff. But
cool. So because it's a job that requires so many different hats, you really have to be good at your own time management, be fast, and it's just about making your life easier. Doesn't mean you can't do the job, but it would just mean that you might have 2 hours to watch Netflix.
100%. You can go. You can do stuff, even though I feel like there's some days where it's super busy until you actually finish work.
Yeah.
And there's some days when, honestly, I think with the talent acquisition part of it as well, because a lot of it is liaising. That's another thing. You have to be good at networking.
Okay, networking.
That's I should have said that as my number one. Be good at networking. Even though I said people.
Yeah.
Because I think the part of liaising is you liaise with different parts of the business as well.
Okay.
In my current role, you liaise with different managers who work in different sections, literally all across Perth.
Yeah.
And it's trying to make sure that they can give you what you want out of, you pretty much want to get all the information you want out of them, and making sure that you have a good, respectful relationship where I'm this is what I want from you. This is what you want from me. This is how we're doing it. This is how we're doing the business case. Making sure that they're getting all the information back to you timely, because you'll be surprised how many people are terrible, in quotation marks, at checking their emails. You request something. You request something, and then some people don't hear back from 3 days. But I think if you've networked and you've actually built those relationships and built a certain level of rapport and expectations with the people that you're actually emailing, you'll get information back really quickly, which will also maybe make you finish your day quicker, rather than all this information coming to you at 4:45 and you leave at 5 o'clock.
That's fair. So it sounds like your, I guess I won't say skill cap, but the difficulty cap in HR depends on so many different things.
It does.
How well you can manage your time, your relationships with your colleagues, which you might have never met, or you only have 5-minute conversations once every few months. But that could really be the difference between leaving work, on time, or being able to have that flexibility to work on something else and free up your own time.
Yeah, definitely.
So in terms of leaving work and things, what's the typical hours like for you then?
At the moment, I think it's 7.5 hour day.
Okay.
Because I do a half hour lunch, but I start at 8 o'clock in the morning. finish around 4:00.
Yep.
It just ends up working really well with the company because it's very flexible. Sometimes I can go in at 8:30, finish 4:30, start at 9, finish at 5. It's very much, as long as I put in the hours and actually put in the work, it's good. And I'll normally do a Monday to Friday, but it's great because I work for a non-for-profit as well.
Yep.
So some people will do a 4-day week.
Yep.
Some people can work from home. I just prefer going into work, making
Okay.
sure that I finish everything that I need to do at work between like 8 to 4.
Yeah.
So then at least for me, I'm done and I don't have to think about work outside of
Work.
outside of work. Yeah, that's it. I come
yeah.
home, we pack up, and
Yeah.
there's the odd occasion that I'll do something at home. Like today, I needed to send something, but I was like, I won't get this information until 5:00.
Yep.
I'm finishing at 4:00.
Yep.
I will respond once I get home off the train at home or something like that. But at least I'm home. Yeah.
So there's a lot of like workplace flexibility in terms of like physically being there or not. And in terms of the hours as well, are you able to be like, I want a 1 hour lunch and therefore I'll work 30 minutes later? Or,
Yeah. I think it varies on the organization as well.
Yes,
So
so you can't go into this industry expecting this to be the norm.
Yeah.
So this is much more specific to your workplace culture. The
yeah,
company.
very much. Because I think my previous role where I did 8:00 to 5:30.
Yes.
Yeah, for me that was super long. I feel like
Oh.
I finished I was like the same thing. I finished my work really early because work finished really later. You find like there's all these hours that you're really just kind of like, I don't know, you can do your own life admin, but after a couple, it gets long. So I think you just figure out how to plan your day and actually stretch it out a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But it varies because of course, sometimes you will actually be required to do interviews.
Yeah.
Very rare in the job that I'm in that I actually do interviews at the moment. You'll be required to make sure like either you do business cases for roles or making sure, I don't know. It just varies on the day of the job and also potentially the industry as well. Cause some people have different hourly requirements. Some people don't do lunch. Some people eat at their desks, but I make it important to have lunch.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I mean, it's good that you have that control because there are some industries out there that you don't have that flexibility. And again, it is typical from company to company, but certain industries just like simply don't have that choice, such as if you worked in certain healthcare where you're paid to be there. So it's a little bit different. You're not paid as per se as to how many projects that you do.
Yeah,
you're paid to be there so that when you're there, you can work.
And that's and I think that's what really drives that health industry and the non-for-profit industry. It's very much, very on the time that you're there rather than, okay, this is how much we're paying you to actually, I don't know. Yeah.
So there's always that trade-off, right? Where do you think the trade-off is for that flexibility you get? So would it be like when there's like a really stressful project where you don't have enough hours in the day, would that mean that you would actually have to work overtime or what happens?
I think, if you have, look, for me, overtime is literally half an hour max.
That's pretty good.
That is my overtime, except unless I have plans after work, then I will probably stay back at work an hour, but that's literally because it's easier to get parking in the morning. But I think, when you're busy, I think it's just managing that time and actually managing what you do in filler time, because I feel a lot of time, even when it's super, super, super busy, I don't think you should be spending more than half an hour extra at work.
Yeah.
And I've worked in previous roles where I did some project management stuff where I actually would be writing proposals, and sometimes we'd stay back after work 3 hours, and it probably is not super good because like you're just slogging through typing stuff in when you can sometimes fit it in. And I think that trade-off comes in with what you do in your filler time. If you're spending way too much time going to get coffee, get you some coffee pods, get you a little tiny coffee machine on your desk. I think it's finding in what you do with your filler time to actually figure out, try to make yourself not overwork yourself to a point where you don't need to. But I think there's times when you can put in the 3 hours work. But I think in this industry, very rare unless you can't interview someone or you need to actually be there with someone who's on the other side of the country and you need to stay back. Because we're in WA, we get the better end of it because it's later for most people when it's still early for us. So
they're pretty much ending work while we're
start. So then if someone needed to like do a phone or a Skype interview, you'd probably be at like, I don't know, 2 o'clock, and you can have like those virtual meetings over East. And if it's anything that requires anything overtime, you can do it at home. But I don't think you should be putting in a lot of work unless it's working on a project.
Unless it's really necessary.
Really, really necessary. But I think
So it's good then. That means your industry, you have that capability to really knock it out of the park when you can.
Yeah.
In terms of overtime, to different people, that means different things. I know certain industries, when they say overtime, it's like, oh boy, I want to grab overtime because I get paid more. For your industry, do you get compensated for that overtime, or is it just like expected?
Some people, it depends. I think then that falls on depending on how you're working for the company. If you're working on a, I think, casual or part-time basis, then that is definitely a money grab.
Money grab opportunity.
That's a money grab opportunity.
That's
like, if you're like, this is how many hours I do a week. If I can put in, say, an extra 3 hours over the week, which could just mean like half an hour every day or something like that, I'm literally over that threshold, which means then they had to pay me like, I don't know, $60 an hour, maybe and
So would that be like, is it like double time or?
yeah, so I think it depends on the industry and what they have for overtime rates for that. And so I think for a lot of part-time and casual stuff, that's pretty much where that ends up happening.
Yeah.
With a lot of full-time stuff, you'll find a lot of times you're on a salary, and if you work overtime, you either just get more and you actually claim it. You'll hopefully get more days off that you actually get paid for, or like more hours off. So you can kind of like, if I've worked an extra 3 hours, maybe you can take 3 hours back another week, or get paid for it and time in lieu and stuff. So I think then that falls into motivation. But I guess in terms of casual or part-time or just like working contract as well, that just falls then back to your priority, because I think for me it's not about the extra money. I'm like, nope, I'd rather get some extra sleep or like extra time hanging out with friends than extra money. But yeah, there's definitely the opportunity, I think, in the industry to get that extra money. And if you want that cash money, go get it.
Go get it. So for you, it would be more like that work-life balance. Hey,
definitely.
And that means this industry, if someone really values that work-life balance and it's essential, say it's someone who needs to look after their kids, or someone who just has a buzzing social life, this industry could suit them.
I think it'd be really good because you do get to network with people on a daily basis. I think if you work more on a client side basis as well with the people who are kind of like, if you end up, I guess, the peak where you want to get into terms of promotion, that you want to kind of be like a HR business partner. And mostly you kind of look at the strategic aspects of things, making sure that you take, I don't know, that's when the networking really kicks in, making sure you actually know what the needs of the business are when kind of the peak recruitment periods are. So I think in terms of that, you can, you get to network with people. You can literally go out and have booze brunches with some people, depending on if the company's paying for some companies. But and you do get that work-life balance, and you can really, you can work from home remotely, depending on the business. But you get that work-life balance. If you actually want it, you can go out and get it.
Cool. So what about you? So speaking personally, what do you value in a job? Or when you're looking for a new job, a new field, or what makes you decide that yes, I want to work here, or no, I'm not going to compromise. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Big thing for me definitely is that well, first we'll talk about work environment. It's always a big one.
Yes.
Whenever you pick a job, workplace, when you're in that interview, ask them about their culture. Ask them why the last person left. Unless it's a new position, literally ask that question, because sometimes it's what they don't say, or like what you actually find out. Like, find out a bit more about the business, because people might just come in and leave, and just because of like culture. So for me, it's always, the culture is always a big yes or no ticker for me to join the business. Then that flexibility and work-life balance, depending on, like, I guess for me, if I can actually come in, work, and do my work well, that's a question I ask. Can I leave it and sleep and then come back the next day and do, you know what I mean? So that's, I think, very important for me, because I do, I value hanging out with my friends. So you can catch me on any night, either, socializing, catching up with friends. I do music as well. So
cool.
Yeah. So for me, it's very much trying to balance.
That.
We knew. I know we had to cheeky plug.
We're going to pop you in later.
Yeah. So I think it's that work-life balance, and making sure I actually have time to hang out and do things that I actually love and build into me is another important part. I'm trying to think if there's more. And then the third thing that I think I look for in a role as well is flexibility, because I think, not flexibility, let us take that back. The third thing I look for in a role is variety.
Variety, that's it. Fourth thing is flexibility.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by variety?
I think by variety, I mean, I always get bored if I'm doing the same thing day in, day out. I like something that's different, that changes, which is why I found myself in a lot of either project roles or consulting spaces, because what you do could be different if you look at it on either it's not, you could be working on something for a week. I don't mean that bores me. I just meant like overall, if I was at a job for a year, like maybe every couple months, maybe something changes or a different project or something like that. So I like that kind of variety in what I do. So it's not the same, because I think I could really, really get bored if I do that. And the fourth thing, did we already say flexibility?
We did say flexibility.
We did say flexibility. The fourth thing is I also just look for really good like surroundings of the office environment and what's there to eat. Sometimes I meal prep, but sometimes I'm very like slack.
So location, really.
Location of like the place, how easy it is to get there, like from where you live, because you don't want to be trekking 3 hours to go to a workplace.
Yeah.
Because then that also, I think location and distance and everything, that always falls back to then how long are you taking to get to work?
Yeah.
How long are you taking to get home from work? Because there's the distances and like times you put in to your day as well.
You were saying, sorry.
I was going to be, it's the difference from you like leaving home at like 5 a.m. and getting back home at 7 p.m. and having long days and only 3 hours or 2 hours to chill before you have to go to bed.
And that's actually like a huge part of work-life balance, which people might not necessarily consider.
Yeah.
And like, do you feel like this job ticks all those criteria for you?
It does. My last job was really close when I lived in the city. It was literally a 5-minute bus ride because I was lazy, 15-minute walk into work every day. But this one, because I live further east now, but it's only say a 10-minute drive to the train station and then a 25-minute train ride. And that's literally a 3-minute walk at the slowest pace I can walk.
Yeah.
Most times I walk it in 2 minutes to the office building. So it does make good for good time. So I normally leave home around 7:15 and I'm home by like 5 o'clock at the latest.
That's pretty good. But at the same time, you do start a little bit earlier. Typically in this city, most people work, what would you say, 8:30 to 5?
8:30 to 5, 9 to 5. Depending. Yeah, mostly it's a 9 to 5. But also you want to beat traffic if you drive in as well.
Yes.
So 4 o'clock finishes
is pretty good.
Sweet time.
And you can drive in a bit faster than the peak hour or before the trains fill up if you're taking public transport.
Yeah, definitely. So you can get that not free public transport, get that earlier public transport with less people, but also you can get early bird prices as well, parking if you did in any city as well.
Oh, there you go. I didn't even consider that.
They give you rewards for being early at some parking stations. So it's a good time. If you get there before 7:30, it's like $10, $12 a day, which is about the same cost that it will charge you to take public transport end to end. So
wow. So for flexibility isn't just about your work-life balance. It could also save you a couple of dollars.
100%. It's the difference between the first hour of work just being public transport.
And speaking of dollars, as we're going to talk about the real talk, well, some people are very curious. How much would you say you get paid in this job? In the, like a pay
in this
range?
job in the industry, depending on, I guess it depends on like everything will always fall. Every job will always be like, how many years of experience have you had? What are you bringing to the table? So you can sell yourself. But I think I've seen when people just like first got into the job as well, this is minus super because, that's plus 9.5% on whatever you're doing.
For those people who don't know what super is, it's 9.5% of your annual salary.
Some companies are really lovely. They give you 12%.
There you go.
Or like 15. That adds to your like retirement fund.
Yeah, but you generally can't touch that money until a certain age, or unless you have a financial advisor who can help set it up for you in such a way that you can use it for long-term investments like buying a house. But we won't get into that.
That's another episode.
Yeah. Okay, so what was the range again, sorry?
So like I've seen some people will exclude that super. Some people will start off from, I don't know, if you probably had not done anything HR related or whatever, like on a 50K, then anywhere all the way to, I don't know, if you hit it big time and your HR business partner could probably be making like 150K because you're very much involved in the strategic side of things. But I think that, that depends on company. I know a lot of mining companies pay the big dollars to keep, because you want to make sure that you're getting the right people through the door as well. So it's very varied, but I guess in the healthcare industry as well, you probably maybe, I don't know, peak at that 90, 100K, but that also just depends on what you're bringing.
Right. So in terms of a graduate, you would say like the rough entry level that people should expect now, and it's 2020 currently. So
you're probably aiming around that 55, 60 something,
And as an engineering company, where like that would be the higher end?
That would probably mid-level, depending on, I guess it also depends on job duties. So some
Yeah.
people always like I said, talent acquisition, some people have, or like HR, some people have it all in one role. And if you're doing it all in one role, best believe you better be up in the top spaces. Whereas I know some companies where they've split up the process in different parts. They have people who solely focus on like literally recruitment, just getting people in, doing interviews. Then you have people who are solely focused on making contracts. Whereas some people, like in my current role, I'm part of making contracts as well. So it's always like, depending on what you're actually doing in the job description.
Okay, so as an entry level, if you were just doing one specific thing, you'd say what?
Say like
Around
50, 55.
50, 55? And if you were doing like, you're doing everything.
If you're killing it and you're doing everything for the company and they really, really value you.
Even as a graduate.
Okay, maybe as a graduate. Maybe not.
No, not. Okay.
But I think if they value you, and honestly, because it's very hard to, like, good HR, like end-to-end people are very hard to come by. So
okay.
Yeah.
So what would that be? About 80, 100?
Oh, definitely less. A fresh graduate, probably.
Sorry, not fresh. Yeah,
I was like fresh graduate, or you're like probably still around that 60, 70. I was like 60, 70, including super.
So like 60 without super.
Yeah, probably around then.
Okay.
I think it varies on the company. But.
Interesting. And when you were talking about that, like high end, the 150, some people listening here might be like the real hustlers who really want to make it all the way to the top. Typically, how long would it take for you to get there?
A lot of people that I know have worked, like a lot of people that I know who are like business partners and stuff like that, have worked in industries for a long time. I don't know if I can put a time limit. I can just say that some of them are like in their 50s. But like it's people who definitely, I think you've got that experience of actually working in said industry, or you actually start learning like recruitment trends.
Yeah.
It becomes more, instead of looking at looking at what you're actually doing, like say, for example, on a day-to-day basis, actually looking at an overall strategic thing, like being actually able to being like, okay, so this is a season that we recruit or like we actually have more influx of people coming in, or these are like seasons which is quiet. These are kind of tougher roles to fill. So how do we build a whole strategy? So it actually takes you up from actually doing these things to this is strategic thinking. This is when you actually get to those like big board meetings and make those decisions on that level and actually influence what's happening in the business. Like this is how many people we're letting go.
Yeah.
This is like, so I think if you're very business minded, actually like enjoy processes and actually thinking on a bigger scale side of things.
Yep.
Which takes years and actually years into learning industry. But I think with what I said previously, you can take any of the skills that you learn and implement it in different industries. Like I think the person that currently does a role in what I do at the moment, she was in the mining industry previously and only came to like the role 2-3 years ago.
Cool.
Yeah. And you're able to kind of like just learn business practices and actually learn more about the business for you to get up.
So in terms of like entry level, it's not as protected because like, different people can enter the job as long as they have the skill sets. They don't have to specifically study HR.
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people get in the trap with being like, oh, if I study HR, I'll get a job in HR. And there's a lot of things that I think you do learn that when you do study HR that I think are important in terms of actually running the HR side of things and actually the people management and making sure that you learn a lot through that. But I think in terms of entry level, there's different ways you can actually get into it. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned, because I did not study nothing to do with this, is it's very much about networking and actually how you, who you know, how you sell yourself and actually getting to industry.
Before we get into your journey and how we get into, how you even get the job, what about in terms of high end? Because I know there are some jobs like where if you're a consultant, so to speak, you don't necessarily need consultant experience to become a consultant. You can have a range, and sometimes they, consultants, or they actually appreciate that fresh perspective. So in terms of actually high-end HR, would you say they typically have been HR managers and gone through the HR route to get there?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's people if there's people who know what they want to do from like the get-go. So they're like, I know what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And so they like study HR. They know what businesses and industry they want to get into and actually climb up and know where they go. And then there's some people who just find themselves there. Yeah. And they can still work their way up, like up at the high end. And it's something that I really found at my previous role, which is very true about a whole, like, people come from a different, some people actually studied it, and like, you know, there's people that you're like, they're at the same level and like same income thing and income area, and they both kind of like that ad where it's like same super, same this, and they've just got different ways that they get there. And I think with a lot of with any industry or like HR kind of perspective, you all bring in, like, there's different paths to that peak high end kind of level that you can get up to. I think it's just knowing what you want and actually knowing how to get it, because some people will claw at it and actually network with the people who make those decisions to give those promotions and make sure that they work harder than some people who think
okay, so it really is a trade-off. I think, you know, when you're not in the industry, or when you're looking from an outside perspective, you can think, you just see the number and you're like, wow, this guy earns so much money, but that necessarily might not be worth it. You know, you might not have that work-life balance, or you might have had to claw your way up for the past 20, 30 years. Yeah. And I think that, you know, when people say like it's not all about the money, or the money is not a priority, as much as a cliche as it can be, would you agree that it's true?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about the money. I think some of the people in like this industry are probably not even the best paid people when you think in terms of, I guess, long haul. So I think with some professions, when you graduate, you might start on like a lower end salary or about the same.
Yes.
But I feel like after a year, maybe you might then be like, oh, I jump up to this next pay grade, where some people will stick on that salary that they were on from, I guess, in the talent acquisition space for maybe a year, 2 years, because some companies don't just have the budget for it, because it's not something that they think is a big investment in terms of their organization, but really it probably should be. Yeah, so I think it very much sometimes does fall into be either you love the work and you actually just love that kind of variety side of things, or it could be a long haul and you might have to, I don't know, sell your soul and work really hard.
But generally speaking, there's always going to be some sort of trade-off,
there's some sort
right?
of trade-off, definitely.
Yeah. There's nothing that's perfect.
Nothing.
You know, if you want more money, maybe it's more stress, or, you know, more responsibility.
Or
more competition sometimes. Yeah, interesting. Now we can get into how to get into this job. If someone's, you know, after hearing all this, so it'll be after all the edits, how would one get into industry? That concludes part 1. Thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed this episode of PBandJ. I'm always looking for new ways to make this better for you guys, so before you go, I would really appreciate any feedback, what you liked, what you didn't. If there's anything else you'd like us to cover, or jobs you'd like to hear about, please sure to message me on any of my platform, links in the description. And if you got anything out of this, please share it on the socials and help the algorithms spread it. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to PBandJ.